while others were starving for days.
This man had already built himself a shelter. He thought he'd only stay a few days. Heavy snowfall changed everything. What was supposed to be a few days became the whole winter.
In the California forest, freshly covered in snow. It was the coldest time of the year. Just over 30 years old,
was kicked out of the house by his beautiful wife.
He had no choice but to survive in the wild.
Passing a gently flowing creek, he finally stopped at a wide clearing. 3 clustered pine trees stood ahead, and to Amao, they represented hope.
But the 3 pines couldn't bear much weight.
So he quickly dug a half-meter deep pit in the ground. Using a handsaw, he collected a dead tree trunk
and inserted it into the hole he had dug.
Make the post more stable. Amao gathered various rocks, both from large and small, and placed them into the pit together. He then packed the soil around it in layers to ensure Besides that, he built a tripod structure around to provide support.
After all, if something went wrong in the wild, no one would be there to help. The winter forest had plenty of deadwood.
Amao easily found suitable logs. After sanding them, he tied them to the pine trees,
creating the foundation frame of his treehouse. Spending winter alone chilled him to the bone.
Though he couldn't tell whether it was physical or emotional cold, he quickly lit a bonfire.
And the flames finally brought him some warmth.
Then he brewed himself a cup of coffee. At that moment, nothing felt more satisfying
than a hot cup of coffee.
But Amao didn't rest for long. Another heavy snow began to fall. It's as if the heavens wanted to rush his progress. So he quickly made a ladder
to help with the next steps of construction.
Deadwood was abundant near his shelter.
Whenever needed, he simply took some to burn. He gathered many evenly sized pine logs.
Now he could nail them to the foundation frame.
Amao didn't bring many tools when he left home. Fortunately, he brought a lifetime supply of nails. So he could build as much as he wanted. The frame was nailed down firmly.
But the increasingly cold weather
forced Amao to stop and warm his frostbitten hands. Still, helplessly, he returned to the construction. Time passed bit by bit, and the snowflakes kept falling.
Relying on strong willpower, he completed the final plank of the floor.
The floor was sturdy enough to meet Amao's daily needs.
The frame for the rectangular treehouse followed the same method.
With prior experience, this part didn't take Amao much time.
Considering that heavy winter snow would be a burden on the roof,
he chose a gable roof design.
He carved the doorframes into an upright L shape,
so the roof beams could fit perfectly. This allowed for flawless joint connections.
He also carved grooves into each roof beam,
ensuring a solid connection with the frame.
Strong and secure.
As you can see, the frame could easily support Amao's weight, even with more snow in the future.
His treehouse would remain safe. Following that,
he installed the roof rafters all at once. There was still a lot of moss on the forest floor.
A perfect natural material for insulation. Amao gathered a large in one go. The method was quite simple. He used it along with stacked logs for the walls,
layering them higher and higher.
Though the result didn't look fancy,
the airtight walls were the forest's best gift to Amao.
He built the rest of the walls using the same technique. To ensure smooth construction, he decided to lay the waterproof roof cloth
before
first.
the walls were fully finished. After all, he didn't have a lift to help.
By constantly adjusting the ladder's position, he managed to finish installing the waterproof tarp. Just as Amao finished putting up the tarp, snowflakes began to fall again.
Now, under the protection of the waterproof tarp, he could continue building the walls in peace.
Before heading out, Amao also cut a chimney opening in it for the fireplace. Then he cut an identical hole in the rooftop. Finally, he used sealant glue to attach everything together. The fireplace could both vent smoke and retain warmth.
Amao worked efficiently,
quickly reaching the large front wall section. The weather was getting colder and colder,
so much so that icicles began forming
to maximize insulation.
Amao didn't even leave a window opening.
After all, no one wants to be woken up in the middle of the night just before darkness fell.
Amao finished building all the walls of his shelter, though the door wasn't installed yet. The tightly sealed walls all around ensured he wouldn't suffer from hypothermia. The next day, the outside world was completely buried in snow. Amao had just endured the coldest night of his life.
The first thing he did upon was rush out to gather more deadwood.
He quickly built a large wooden door for the shelter.
Now, he wouldn't be battered by the icy wind to ensure a good night's sleep.
He used the leftover pine wood
to build himself a bed.
With the bed frame finished, the shelter
finally started to resemble a home. Then, he installed the family heirloom fireplace. Now he could light a warm fire.
Even though the snowstorm raged outside, Amao no longer felt cold inside the house.
He braved the wind and snow to carry in more firewood, then returned to the warm cabin.
After adding more wood to the fireplace, he could finally cook himself a hot dinner.
To reward his hard work,
watching Amao eat heartily.
It makes people feel that he is very content.
But there
and happy.
seems to be a hint of sadness as well.
After eating and
He
drinking
can finally have a peaceful sleep tonight. No need to worry about being disturbed by the snow and wind. California in the dead of winter is covered in thick snow.
Like a dreamy world from a fairy tale.
This time, Amao brought back some winter gear.
After a difficult trek, he finally reached his long-missed shelter.
He opened the door of the shelter. Although the interior looks a bit simple, everything feels familiar. This time, he came back to improve the shelter. So he can spend the winter safely and comfortably. Since Amao had never
seen such heavy snowfall before, he couldn't help but worry about
the shelter he built so painstakingly.
So he cut both ends of the logs at an angle
and nailed them onto the beams
to provide as much support for the roof as possible. Because the door he previously made was too crude.
This time, he specially bought some hinges.
Now opening and closing the door is much smoother, considering the lighting inside the shelter.
Amao decided to install 2 windows. Although the windows are small, the light coming in is enough
to brighten the whole room. After finishing this task, Amao looked at the messy interior and fell into deep thought.
He brought some cotton cloths. He nailed them evenly and smoothly onto the
whole
floor.
Now looks much tidier. Before installing the fireplace,
he laid down a layer of heat insulation
to prevent high temperatures
underneath
from damaging the cabin.
After all, no one
to see their hard work go to waste. By the time the fireplace was assembled,
night had already fallen over the forest.
Amao hurried to gather some firewood
and lit the warm fireplace. Tonight's dinner was quite abundant.
Although Amao has never been a great cook, he feels very content with this
self-sufficient
lifestyle.
Even living alone in the wild,
he can still live a romantic life. Tonight, he can finally have a good night's sleep.
The next day remained cold and gloomy.
The warmth inside fogged up the windows. A layer
it's
of mist
clear that
appeared.
Amao slept well last night.
The first thing he did was warm up his body.
Today's breakfast was ham sausage with scrambled eggs. Though it didn't look appealing,
it provided him with high-quality protein, along with whole wheat bread and vitamin-rich tomatoes. It gave Amao energy for the whole day. As for his daily water needs, he just needed to collect a pot of snow
and boil it on the fireplace.
Then he brewed a pot of pine needle coffee. Amao had really figured out wilderness living.
On snowy days like this,
the best thing is to stay in bed, but Amao didn't choose to slack off. He covered the remaining walls with cotton linen
It not
fabric.
only prevented moss from falling due to strong wind,
but also helped improve the insulation of the shelter.
After finishing, the entire room looked much more organized, but there was still no dining table.
Eating or drinking was still inconvenient.
So Amao gathered some scrap wood.
He first drilled a hole into a wooden log, then inserted a sharpened stick into it. Now he had a handy hammer. He could now easily split logs into planks. After assembling them into a tabletop, he attached legs using hinges.
The table could be folded when not in use to save space inside the room.
Busy time always passes quickly. Amao's happiest moment of the day
was dinner time.
Dinner was a premium filet steak. He topped it with herbs
to enhance the aroma of the steak. It didn't need to be cooked long. Medium rare was just perfect for Amao's taste. Served with freshly made pancakes.
It was a gourmet delicacy.
But before eating, he carefully decorated the room
to create a romantic atmosphere.
Even eating alone can be romantic.
But if there were a wild lady, it would be even better. Then he could enjoy his exclusive dinner.
Last winter, Amao built his first wild shelter. After the snow had completely melted, everything revived with the arrival of spring. When we saw Amao again, he looked refreshed after a haircut.
Like a different person.
After enduring a cold,
his
long winter,
treehouse still stood the same, but time had worn it down a bit.
So because of that, Amao decided to renovate it.
Therefore,
he began the restoration of his treehouse. First of all,
he needed a large wooden ladder for the repairs.
Fortunately, this time he brought drilling tools,
which saved him a lot of effort. During the building process,
the ladder turned out very solid and reliable.
Now he could safely fix the roof's waterproofing.
Life in the wild is truly free. Amao took advantage of the sunny weather to collect a sack of free moss.
The previous moss had already withered and died.
It had lost its original function, so he had to replace it with fresh moss.
the oxygen released from
allowed
photosynthesis
AMAO
to live in a natural oxygen bar. But the activity space in the treehouse was really too small.
Even stretching after waking up was hard.
To solve this problem,
AMAO decided to build a terrace for the treehouse so that when the weather was good, he could enjoy coffee on the terrace.
AMAO collected many logs of equal length.
Using his steady stride, he roughly measured the terrace dimensions and then began the immersive digging process.
The ground in early spring making it effortless for AMAO to dig. Soon, he dug 2.5 cubic meters. Then he inserted logs as uprights and filled them with stones inside to ensure the uprights were stable
and they
enough.
had to be tightly secured with 3 layers inside and 3 outside.
After this was done, he also firmly tied the logs to the big tree
to serve as the frame for the terrace. It was similar to the structure for building the treehouse with previous building experience and with the help of the drilling tool this time.
This work was incredibly easy for AMAO. It was a piece of cake.
The gentle breeze of the setting sun softly blew on Ao's face in a very comfortable state.
He also greatly enjoyed this immersive life.
It didn't take long for AMAO to finish building the terrace floor. However, AMAO, who hadn't eaten breakfast, was already ravenous. In the middle of it, he couldn't help but admire the wooden house he built.
Looking at the blazing flames, it seemed to symbolize a mouse
life
outdoor.
Getting better and
then
better.
He skewered several juicy little kunzai. As the saying goes, high-end
only
ingredients
require the simplest cooking methods. Sprinkle various seasonings on them to marinate. Then you can roast them over charcoal fire. Just wait for 2.5 hours,
flipping constantly to prevent burning. And then you can enjoy this delicious meal.
After lunch, the pleasant atmosphere always makes people feel sleepy. Laid out his inflatable mattress,
all his fatigue, and had a wonderful nap.
By the time AMAO woke up, it was already 2:30 in the afternoon.
He was very tired after waking up, and couldn't find any energy, so he immediately made himself a cup of coffee.
It has to be said, after drinking coffee, AMAO was full of energy.
He finished laying the remaining outer flooring.
Due to poor planning, the last piece of flooring
severely affected the normal opening, so AMAO needed to remove it again.
Saw off the excess part, and finally reinstall the main door. Of course, the terrace wasn't completely finished yet.
He still needed to set up protective measures to prevent accidentally falling off when going to the restroom. Although the height wasn't high,
AMAO didn't want to experience the feeling of falling. Once all the terrace railings were installed,
this little home would be considered complete. Finally, he installed a simple bolt on the main door.
AMAO could safely spend his days in the wilderness.
This small, secluded plot
in
of
this
land.
pure land that belonged to him.
He could be free from the influence and quietly live a wonderful, peaceful life.
2 years and 6 months ago, AMAO built his first home. Even now,
he has returned to this familiar place, reminiscing about past memories.
The California forest
still retained a hint of coolness.
The branches were covered with crystal clear AMAO assembled his drilling tool and drilled holes in the center of the wooden stakes.
He planned to make a simple stove
for boiling water and cooking.
He also needed to drill holes on the side of the wooden enough oxygen for the stove to burn properly.
A stove made this way is not only convenient,
but also burns very effectively. To warm himself up quickly,
AMAO made himself a cup of coffee.
He also inserted a small bunch of pine needles into the spout.
A hint of fresh fragrance.
I recommend that everyone
try this if they get the chance. The weather today was excellent. AMAO on camera chose not to slack off, prepared thoroughly for the coming winter. He collected some pine wood from the forest again.
He intended to reinforce the roof of the wooden house. After removing the bark from the pine wood, it could be nailed onto the beams.
As the roof's ridgepole, after all, the roof had only been covered with a layer of waterproofing previously. AMAO could only increase the number of ridgepoles to make the roof as sturdy as possible.
Looking at the neatly arranged ridgepoles, I believe
the treehouse's pressure resistance will also be excellent.
The weather in the forest is always unpredictable. It could change drastically the next second. AMAO also had to quicken his pace.
He nailed a circle of pine wood around the roof.
This would also help to reinforce the roof to improve the wooden house's insulation.
AMAO collected a sack of moss from the ground near his home. Now he could evenly and smoothly spread them on the roof. Although its insulation performance is far inferior to insulation, are inexhaustible
and readily available. Coupled with the future warm shelter inside the house,
he believed it wouldn't be too cold in the bitter winter.
After this was done,
Amao fixed several wooden stakes to the fence. This not only stabilized the fence
but also
structure,
made it less likely to fall when
to
going
a certain
out at
extent.
night.
It ensured Amao's personal safety.
Time lies when you're busy, and it was time for lunch.
Amao lit a bonfire. The smoke produced by the burning seemed to add a touch of human warmth to the forest.
Today's lunch was a prime cut of beef.
Amao took out his portable seasonings and completely covered the beef in a 360-degree marinade. While the beef was marinating, Amao planned to make a rotating grill. The grilling cooking method
can greatly bring out the aroma of the beef.
He first sharpened one end of a wooden stake,
then drilled holes on the side.
Amao drilled a total of 4 such holes,
allowing for temperature adjustment. Then he sharpened a wooden stick so it could be directly inserted into the drilled holes. He installed a rotating
thus creating a rotatable grill.
Now he could skewer the marinated.
However, he also needed to tie it with to make it easier to rotate and roast. Amao also fried potato leaves, broccoli, and tomatoes.
But suddenly, a strong wind
and sporadic
picked up.
Snowflakes subtly drifted through the air. Amao furrowed his brow
and managed to boil some water.
Then he went to collect some wild berries and blueberries
and put them
from
in the boiling water. They would provide him with rich vitamins.
Now he could return to the warm house and enjoy this hearty lunch. After eating and drinking, it was still snowing coldly outside. Now, Amao could relax peacefully. The next day, the snow finally stopped.
But it was still bitingly cold outside.
This forced Amao to change the drafty walls.
He had to tear down the hard-won
shedding
cotton
tears
and linen
as he did
had
so.
previously
Fortunately,
installed.
this time he brought
He stuffed
insulation
them all
cotton
into the gaps in the walls.
The dried moss also needed to be replaced, filling all the gaps with insulation cotton,
ensuring not a single gust of wind leaked through.
Once all the gaps
were filled with insulation cotton,
Amao would be able to
this
spend
winter warmly and comfortably. After Amao finished this task, he went near his home and chose a dead tree. Since it was a dead log,
Amao easily sawed it down.
He sawed it into small segments
and piled them in the space beneath the treehouse. The next day arrived in a blink of an eye.
Amao's treehouse had completely blended with the snowy
appearing
forest.
so peaceful. After waking Amao put a thermometer in front of his door. Even if the snow wasn't heavy, it was still minus 10 degrees Celsius.
To better resist the severe cold,
Amao decided to lay solid wood flooring inside the house. He first made himself a wooden mallet. This made it easier for him to slice the wooden stakes he had collected earlier on the ground. At this point, the outdoor temperature had already reached minus 20 degrees Celsius.
Thinking of his cozy little home,
Amao persevered through the hardship.
Alone, despite how tiring it was.
Then he could nail these sliced wooden boards
onto the ground, piece by piece.
Although the wooden boards looked very rough,
they were all sliced by Amao himself.
Just this point alone
already makes him much stronger
than those wilderness bloggers who fake this things. Process might not look difficult, but in reality,
it required a lot of Amao's time and energy.
But fortunately, this work was done indoors,
which was much more comfortable than working outdoors.
Amao spent a full 2.5 days
to complete the entire floor installation.
Days passed by. The entire forest was completely covered in heavy
looking
snow.
So beautiful.
Amao made a shelf
that he could usually use to store small items.
Because the weather was incredibly cold, Amao finally brought out his new fireplace. The fireplace's exhaust vent
making
was on
installation
the side of the
much easier. Before placing the fireplace, he also had to attach heat-resistant tinfoil to the side wall.
The high temperature
could easily ignite the surrounding wooden walls. Amao certainly didn't want so many days of effort.
With the fireplace fully installed, Amao quickly chopped some firewood under the cover at night corner.
Then he lit the warm fireplace.
Watching the warm firelight, Amao stared blankly for a long time.
To celebrate the complete perfection of his new home, also prepared a sumptuous feast to properly reward himself. Today, Amao will teach you how to make a delicious beef and onions in a hot pan
to bring out the aroma of the food.
Then scoop a spoonful of broad
and stir
paste
it thoroughly until well
After
mixed.
That, add salt and chicken bouillon for seasoning. Add purified water to cover the
side
ingredients.
Dishes, Amao prepared diced
and
potatoes.
Fresh peas. Stir well, then cover and simmer for 2.5 hours.
While waiting, Amao hung for kerosene lamps at his doorstep,
making the whole house look so cozy. At this time, The indoor temperature
A
had
temperature
also
difference
reached
of a
30
full
degrees
50
Celsius.
degrees
Dinner
between
was
indoor
also
and
cooked
if you
outdoor.
ask me, everything
It would
was
have
perfect.
been even better with a bowl of millet rice. 3 years and 6 months ago,
Amao built his first home.
here, he spent his loneliest
And also most enjoyable winter. To revisit those beautiful memories, Amao quit his breadwinning job, planning to come back and see the place. While the weather was
Walking
fair, across the wooden bridge
he saw his old friend, whom he hadn't
this place
seen
held
in a long
many
time.
memories in his mind.
Amao joyfully opened the door of the wooden
Everything
house.
was still familiar. Every item inside the house could evoke
This
past
time,
scenes.
Amao
Planned to build a fence around the wooden house. The forest's timber resources were still
allowing
abundant.
Amao to easily collect some logs. He placed them on the workbench. Then he assembled his drilling tool. He only needed to drill 2 holes in each log.
After sharpening one end,
they could be driven into the ground to become part of the fence.
For connecting the 2 uprights, Amao processed tenons at both ends of the logs. This created a connector.
Then he aligned the tenon grooves with each other.
However, there was an error. The frame connection wasn't stable enough.
Amao used twine to tie and secure it.
After getting a set of wooden stakes,
he could place logs on top to form the fence. As the saying goes, the beginning is always the hardest.
Rest of the fence
could be built by simply following the pattern.
Amao worked very efficiently. Soon, the fence part was completed. As for making the gate, Amao first used a chisel to carve grooves into a short handle, then used a drill to make holes.
The other end was carved into a tenon.
Amao made a pair of these handles.
After installing the uprights,
Amao used a similar method
to create a rotating shaft.
At this point, he just needed to build the gate on the rotating shaft.
During the construction process,
Amao didn't use a single iron nail. Was made entirely of
doing
solid
it this
wood.
way might be much slower.
But for Amao, the sense of accomplishment from creating something purely from solid wood.
Finally, he just needed to
and the
insert
main door
the
was
pin.
completely finished. At this point, the sky uncooperatively began to drizzle with cold rain. Amao's wooden house appeared even cozier. When the rain lightened a bit, Amao lit a bonfire to dry his rain-soaked shirt. Seeing such a vigorous flame, Amao decided to move dinner an hour earlier.
After heating oil in the pan,
he fried the small chickens in it.
Then he added various side dishes to enhance the flavor.
It was clear that this pot had very high nutritional
value. After adding various seasonings, he poured in
Covered
purified water and simmered it for 2.5
delicious,
hours.
nutritious, and flavorful chicken stew was ready. This was Amao's favorite.
He also greatly enjoyed being able to eat such a satisfying
when he was
earthly
extremely
delight.
hungry. Wow. After eating and drinking his fill, inflated his air mattress, wrapped himself tightly, and went into a sweet afternoon nap. In the afternoon, the sky cleared up again. After his nap was
living
full
in
of
the
energy.
wilderness.
Access to clean water was a problem that had to be solved. Sawed down a hollow tree stump from a dead tree. He used a chisel to expand the inner space.
He planned to make a water bucket
to conveniently hold and retrieve water later.
After cleaning the inside,
Amao drew a plan on a piece of tree stump, following the inner circumference.
Then he sawed off the excess part.
After inserting it, he got the bottom of the wooden bucket. However, there were still gaps between the log and the tree.
But there are always more solutions.
Pine resin from pine trees is a natural sealant. Just heat it over a fire to melt it, and it can be used to fill the gaps. This created a watertight wooden bucket.
Then Amao tied 3 logs together, and when opened, it formed a tripod.
He intended to make a filter.
He tied different layers at different heights on the tripod.
The first layer held pebbles
to filter out larger impurities.
The second layer was fine,
then he placed some weeds.
And the last layer was charcoal.
Because charcoal has good absorption
and
properties,
can absorb
tiny bacteria and impurities.
Amao also preheated several stones in the
which
fire,
he could use to boil water
then
later. Amao took water from the nearby stream and poured it into the filtering device. Worried that the impurities weren't fully filtered out.
It several now the
times.
Water was much cleaner.
Finally, he threw in the red-hot stones.
The stones reached temperatures of hundreds
After
to thousands
just a few
of degrees. The water boiled. Oh my God! Look at these guys.
Scoop it up with a cup, and after letting it settle for a bit, the joy of the wilderness is that simple. And there are many ways for Amao when he's bored. Happiness. He'll inflate his kayak, then paddle the kayak to find a suitable spot,
and then cast a line. The joy of fishing isn't about catching many fish. What's important is the fishing process
Amao
itself.
was very lucky this time, because he wasn't skunked, which often happened
this
to him.
Mandarin fish looked very cute. Amao admired it for a long time.
But that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was its plump flesh.
It seemed dinner was sorted for today. Just sprinkle some fine salt on top.
And fry it in a hot pan.
Add some onions and potatoes as side dishes. This wilderness romance.
can be served. Taking advantage of the weekend,
Amao brought many living supplies from home. Of course, the most important was this fireplace.
Boiling water the ancient way
Amao climbed the ladder
and installed the fireplace chimney to facilitate his upcoming solitary
Amao
life.
planned to equip the wooden house with
He
new
used
furniture,
a broadaxe to split the logs.
but this alone couldn't produce flat wooden boards.
Fortunately, he also
This
brought
could
a planer.
easily smooth out the uneven surfaces. After finishing, drill holes on the side.
Sharpen wooden pegs
Insert
from
them
branches
into the holes, and you can join the wooden boards to expand them.
Amao also made another piece of wood like this
next to the window as a table.
After planing it smooth.
It was perfect for eating and drinking tea. Amao also installed a shelf on the wall.
Not only could it be used to store axes, but it also served as a certain decorative effect for the interior.
Cold and damp.
The temperature in the forest was only 2 or 3 degrees Celsius,
and neatly stored it under the table.
There were many cedar trees near the stream by his home.
Amao collected a lot of them. After pulling them apart, they became soft plant fibers.
He used a portion of it to stuff into the wall, preventing the intrusion of cold wind. Another portion he sewed into a cloth bag, stuffing it completely.
This made a soft pillow that could improve Amao's sleep at night.
The cold temperature of the
was
forest
dispelled by the roaring flames in the fireplace. The rising cooking smoke
also brought back the usual warmth and life to make cooking easier. Amao splurged on a roasting oven.
Impatient, he wanted to test how well it worked.
So he rolled out a dough disc
and prepared his favorite sauce, spreading it evenly on the dough.
He also sprinkled a layer of shredded cheese with sausage and vegetables,
and placed it in the oven. What Amao had to do next
was to supply oxygen to the fireplace, thereby increasing the heat. Half an hour later, a delicious and tempting pizza was complete.
Amao was very satisfied with his cooking skills. After eating, his body had reached its peak of contentment. Bolted the main door, nestled in his secure little cabin, leaning against the continuously warming fireplace, and then drifting into a sweet sleep.